Last Friday night, I just missed the last train home, and I had to deal with all the rideshare surge pricing that kicks in right when Metro closes and all the bars close. A few weeks ago, I took a train out of town. The station I departed from was served by excellent transit, but I had to drive since it was too early for Metro service. The same thing is going to happen later this week with a flight. And in each of these cases, there was an easy and convenient Metro link that I would have certainly loved to have taken if it was open, but it wasn't. So this got me thinking, when it comes to what makes transit great, how important is it to have a continuous span of service? What are the benefits of 24-hour transit service? Why is such service so rare? And just how much is it worth trying to improve it? Welcome to Transit World, videos on all things transportation, with a focus on the developing world. So why do we need 24-hour transit service? Well, simply put, it's really the only way to have a system where you can truly travel anywhere at any time. Owl trips are rare, but everyone does take them sometimes. You might be returning from events on Friday or Saturday night, or you might be traveling to or from a very early or very late flight. Or maybe you're one of the people where these trips actually aren't that rare. You might work a graveyard shift. In the US alone, 6% of the workforce regularly works night shifts sometime between 11 p.m. and 7 a.m. 24-hour service also provides riders an extra sense of reliability. You might forego a trip during the service period just because you're worried about the risk that you could potentially get stranded if you have to stay late or you have something else unexpected happen. If frequency is freedom, nothing kills frequency more than stopping all service. So what options do cities have? Well, the first option, of course, is just to not do anything about this, not provide any service at all at night. And globally, well over 90% of all cities with transit do precisely this. Another option is to just provide a skeletal bus-only service for the overnight period. There's about 90 cities, give or take, that do this globally. And the most robust option is to keep the rails running too, at least to some skeletal extent. There's very few cities that actually do this. So who does have some sort of owl service? Well, to be honest, it's mostly in Europe and North America. China and India combined have less cities with 24-hour service than the US. I don't know why. I've touched on this before in previous videos. Perhaps this is some sort of cultural difference. But I've lived in Asia and several parts of the global south, and I know that there's plenty of going on after hours in those locations. Is this really a cultural difference? Is there something inherently Western about prioritizing span over ridership? I don't know. When it comes to overnight rail service, the rarest breed of them all, as far as I can tell, there are only 9 cities in the entire world that provide this service. Can you guess which ones they are? Well, you might be able to guess 1 or 2 of them. New York is probably the most famous of them all. But when you look at the list, only 3 of these actually provide owl service every day. The other 6 only provide it on the weekends. So, I don't know, did I miss any? Let me know if I did. But I really do think the takeaway here is going to remain the same. There are very few rail networks that operate overnight service. So of course then the question is, why? Well, I'm going to get to that in just a minute, but before I do, just a reminder to please hit that like button, subscribe if you want any more hot takes on after-hour only content. Patreon support, of course, is also always appreciated. And please feel free to let me know what you like and don't like about the channel. Trying to improve here all the time, even though it's been about 8 months since I made a video. Should I have more posters? Maybe less posters? Is it weird that I always wear the same t-shirt? So why is it so rare to provide rail service overnight? Well, the short answer is that every system needs to conduct maintenance. The only time to do this is when there are no trains running on the track you are servicing. And the easiest time to not have any trains running on the stretch of track is when there's no trains running at all. Sometimes, yes, larger maintenance projects will require partial closures of the system during scheduled operating hours. I know we all love those. But there's also a lot of little routine maintenance procedures that you might not think about that truly do need to take place almost daily. So if you want to keep the rail running at night, you need to be able to service any part of the track network without having to completely stop service. To do this, you really need 2 big things. The first is infrastructure, and the second is planning. On the infrastructure side, you need to make sure you have the clearance needed between tracks so workers can have space to maneuver without interfering with the live track. You also need crossover tracks to allow trains to share a single piece of track when you are working on an adjacent one. And you need electrical separation between the tracks, so you can turn off one track for maintenance while keeping the power flowing to the live one for service. There's also a whole bunch of other random things you need, like bidirectional signals in the tracks and changeable signage and flexible platform operations at the stations. And all this infrastructure is critical, but you also need to pair it with planning. Planning single tracking operation is actually very complicated. You need to make sure you consider the impact on the train headways and the schedules. You need to ensure that there's worker safety procedures put in place. And just generally speaking, if you're going to single track essentially every night while maintaining service, you're going to have less flexibility in where you're able to do maintenance and where you're going to place those maintenance crews. You're going to need a more regimented plan for when you will work on particular parts of the track. And you're going to need more specific coordination with the maintenance crews on where they're going, when, and how they're going to get there. And if you don't have any of the above, it's not impossible to build it, but it does require a lot of money. So is it worth it? Well, clearly right now, the average transit agency in the world has decided it's not. Well, I think you need to consider span as really just another form of coverage. It's just in the time dimension instead of the physical dimension. And so this really does enter into the same larger debate on how to best balance frequency and ridership versus coverage. And if you are in a city where funds are limited, maybe it is better to prioritize peak hour service versus hour routes. But I do think if you truly want to be a world-class transit operation, you do need to keep the overnight options. You need to have the ability to move the city at any time. But do buses suffice? Do you really need to run the rails at night? Well, I honestly think buses probably are sufficient in most cases. But I do think there are a few times where it does make sense to keep the rails going overnight. The first is if your system's already set up to accommodate 24-hour service. New York is an excellent example of this. The extensive triple tracking and quad tracking, especially on the corridors where they have express service, makes the challenge of shutting down portions of track still difficult, but a lot less so. The second is if you have a high capacity need at night. This might be true in cities like Tokyo, where it's quite common for white-collar workers, for better or for worse, to be expected to stay out late with colleagues. Or in cities where there's large entertainment industries. Las Vegas is probably the best example of this, but also any world media hubs like Los Angeles and Mumbai would probably fall in this category. You may also want to consider rail transit at night if your bus routes are just going to take a long time to replace that service. It could be that you still have streets that are snarled in traffic, even in the middle of the night. Or there could just be no good way to run a bus that connects all the metro stations within the street network in any reasonable amount of time. Transit is always harder to justify when there is low demand. And there is always going to be lower demand in the middle of the night. But as the world globalizes and becomes increasingly complex, the trend is towards more people up at night, not less. World-class cities never sleep, and neither should their transit. That's all I've got for today. Thanks again for watching. Look forward to seeing you in the next video. Don't forget to like and subscribe. Until next time.